In Chapter 6, we're going to talk about strategic management. Michael Porter is a name you are going to hear a lot of times throughout your business program. He worked at Harvard Business School as a professor, and it's been said he is the single most important strategist working today and maybe of all time. He's the most famous and influential business professor who has ever lived, Fortune writer Jeffrey Colvin said. He's widely and rightly regarded as the all-time greatest strategy guru. Strategic positioning was developed by Michael Porter, and it attempts to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage that we talked about in the last chapter by preserving what is distinct about a company. Performing different activities from rivals or performing similar activities in different ways is how strategic positioning is achieved. There are three key principles that underlie the concept of strategic positioning. The first is strategy is the creation of a unique and valuable position. The second is that strategy requires trade-offs and competing. And the third is that strategy involves creating a fit among activities. For the first one, the unique and valuable position, there are different things that can be addressed. There may be few needs but many customers. Strategic position can be derived from serving the few needs of many customers. For example, Jiffy Lube provides only lubricants, but it provides them to all kinds of people with all kinds of motor vehicles. For the next one, broad needs and few customers, a strategic position may be based on serving the broad needs of just a few customers. The example here is wealth management and investment advisory firm Bessemer Trust. This focuses exclusively on high net worth clients. And finally, strategy may be oriented towards serving the broad needs of many customers. An example here would be national movie theater operator Carmike Cinemas, which operates only in cities with populations of fewer than 200,000 people. Strategic positioning also requires trade-offs and competing. A company has to choose not only what strategy to follow, but what strategy not to follow. An example here is Neutrogena soap, where Porter points out is positioned more as a medical product than as a cleansing agent. In achieving this narrowing positioning, the company gives up sales based on deodorizing, gives up large volume, and accordingly gives up some manufacturing efficiencies. And finally, strategy involves creating a fit among activities. Fit has to do with the way a company's activities interact and reinforce one another. For example, a mutual fund such as Vanguard Group allows a low-cost strategy and aligns all of its activities accordingly, distributing funds directly to consumers and minimizing portfolio turnover. This slide shows the 5 steps of the strategic management process. The first step is to establish the mission and vision and value statement. The second is to assess the current reality. The third is to formulate the grand strategy. Step 4 is to implement the strategy, and step 5 is to maintain that strategic control. There are feedbacks that happen in this process, and revisions need to occur if necessary based on the feedback. The next few slides will break each of these steps down further. In assessing the current reality, we are going to look at where the organization stands internally and externally to determine what's working and what's not. Management needs to see what can be changed so as to increase efficiency and effectiveness, and tools in this step include competitive intelligence, SWOT analysis, forecasting, benchmarking, and Porter's model for industry analysis. Competitive intelligence means gaining information about one's competitors' activities so that you can anticipate their moves and react appropriately. Sources of information include public print and advertising, investor information, or informal sources. If you are a manager, one of your worst nightmares is that a competitor will surprise you with a service or product that will revolutionize the market and force you to try to play catch up. An example of this is the craft beers and what they did to major breweries. Successful companies make it a point to conduct competitive intelligence. Again, this is a search of publications, advertising, investing information, and other informal sources of information to ensure that you know what your competitors are up to. Environmental scanning monitors an organization's internal and external environment to detect early signs of opportunities and threats that may influence the firm's plans. A SWOT analysis, which stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats, and it's important to know that strengths and weaknesses are internal and opportunities and threats are external. The SWOT analysis should provide you with a realistic understanding of your organization in relation to its internal and external environment so you can better formulate strategy in pursuit of its mission. Here is a graphic that shows how a SWOT analysis can be complete. It's divided into two parts, inside matters and external matters. So it shows, again, internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. An example of organizational strengths may be things such as the skills and capabilities that give the organization special competencies and competitive advantage in executing strategies in pursuit of its mission. Organizational weaknesses may be drawbacks that hinder an organization in executing the strategy. Organizational opportunities are environmental factors that the organization may exploit for competitive advantage. And organizational threats are environmental factors that hinder an organization's achieving a competitive advantage. An example of a strength may be competent management or strong financial situations. An example of a weakness may include old or inefficient equipment. Opportunities may be that a competitor went out of business, so now you can get those customers. And a threat may be that we are in a bad economy at the time. This slide shows an example of SWOT characteristics of a college campus. I am not going to read it to you, but you can take a look at it. And this will help you in your SWOT assignment that you guys will all complete individually in this class. So please make sure you review and understand this slide and let me know if you have any questions. In forecasting, you're trying to predict the future. A lot of people make predictions, of course, and often they are wrong. In the 1950s, the head of IBM, Thomas J. Watson, estimated that the demand for computers would never exceed more than 5 for the entire world. In the late 1990s, many computer experts predicted power outages, water problems, transportation disruptions, bank shutdowns, and far worse because of computer glitches, in other words, the Y2K bug, associated with the change from the year 1999 to 2000. Of course, the further into the future one makes a prediction, the more difficult it is to be accurate, especially in matters of technology. Yet forecasting is a necessary part of planning. There are two types of the two types of forecasting are trend analysis and contingency planning. Trend analysis is a hypothetical extension of a past series of events into the future, and contingency planning creates an alternative hypothetical but equally likely future conditions. This is also called scenario planning and scenario analysis. Benchmarking is a process by which a company compares its performance with that of high-performing organizations. An example is airlines use such benchmarks as average turnaround time, on-time arrivals, cost per seat per passenger mile, fuel cost, and numbers of lost bags. Think of other industries who may use benchmarking. Why would they want to do this? Michael Porter also came up with 5 generic competitive forces. He contends that business-level strategies originate in these 5 primary competitive forces in the firm's environment. He also contends that these environments are not industry-specific. So whatever industry a company competes in, they face these 5 competitive forces. The first is threat of new entrants, which is our competitors. Bargaining power of suppliers. If you think about it, if there's only one supplier, that supplier has a lot of influence on the prices and supply. The bargaining power of buyers, so who is buying your product. The threat of substitute products or services. An example of this is the sugar industry faces a threat from the low-calorie sugar substitutes such as Splenda. And then rivalry among competitors and how fierce that is or is not in an industry. Next, we are going to shift our focus to formulation of the grand strategy. We're going to cover that on this slide as well as the next few slides. The grand strategy comes after assessing the current reality. It explains how the organization's mission is to be accomplished. This slide covers 3 common grand strategies. The first one is growth strategy. This involves expansion, as in sales revenue, market share, number of employees, or number of customers. An example of a growth strategy is Etsy, which is a Brooklyn, New York company that runs an online marketplace for handmade and vintage goods, such as jewelry, housewares, and t-shirts. Etsy charges fees to sellers to use its platform. The firm showed strong growth in 2015 when revenues in the fourth quarter rose 35% to $87.9 million. In the stability strategy, this involves little or no significant change. An example of the stability grand strategy is, without much changing their product, the makers of Timex watches decided to stress the theme of authenticity, which is wear it well, over durability, when their old slogan was, "It takes a licking and keeps on ticking." And then finally, the defensive strategy. This involves reduction in the organization's efforts. It's a retrenchment. An example of this is the big sales numbers that have sustained the record music business for years are way down, and it's hard to see how they could ever return to where they were a decade ago. This slide I included for your review. It just gives an example, and it's from your book, about how companies can implement a grand strategy. It shows the 3 that we just talked about on the previous slide. And as you read through these, I want you to see if you can think of examples of companies that might be using or have used one of these grand strategies. Michael Porter also developed 4 competitive strategies that companies use. 2 of them are discussed on this slide, and 2 will be discussed on the following slide. Cost leadership focuses on keeping prices low in a wide market. Firms include Timex, computer maker Acer, hardware retailer Home Depot, and pen maker Bic. They're going after a broad market. Cost focus strategy, on the other hand, keeps prices low, but the difference is this one targets a narrow market. It's often executed with low-end products sold in discount stores, such as low-cost beer or cigarettes, or with regional gas stations. Again, the cost focus strategy focuses on a narrow market. Differentiation focuses on unique and superior products targeting wide markets. This is a strategy that's followed by Ritz-Carlton Hotels and the makers of Lexus automobiles. A focused differentiation strategy, however, focuses on unique and superior products targeting a narrow market. Norwegian Cruise Line offers on its cruise ship Norwegian Escape a special section called the Haven for 275 elite passengers who enjoy 24-hour butler service as well as a private pool, sun deck, and restaurant. A company also needs to think about whether to have a single product strategy or a diversification strategy. The single product strategy is the kind of strategy you see all the time as you drive past the small retail businesses in a small town. There may be one shop that sells only flowers, one that sells only security systems, and so on. The risk with this type of strategy is that you're vulnerable. I want you to take a minute and think why that might be the case. The diversification strategy is where businesses are operating several businesses in order to spread the risk. Products may be related or unrelated. The key here is it kind of helps us answer that question I asked on the last slide. When you have a single product strategy, the risk is that if that industry does bad for any reason, then your whole entire business is at risk. As this slide notes, when you're diversified, it helps spread the risk. Vertical integration is when a firm expands into businesses that provides the supplies it needs to make its products or that distributes and sells its products. This is a specific diversification strategy, basically where the company owns the suppliers and distributors of its products. An example is Starbucks has long followed a plan of vertical integration by buying and roasting all of its own coffee and then selling it through the Starbucks coffee stores. A company that uses a blue ocean strategy creates a new and uncontested market space that makes competitors irrelevant, creates new consumer value, and decrease the cost. There are two ways to create a blue ocean. One is to invent a completely new industry, as eBay did when it created the online auction industry, and as Cirque du Soleil did when it reinvented the circus by blending opera, dance, and athletic skill, and eliminated star performers and animals. The second way is to create a blue ocean within a red ocean, as when a company expands the boundaries of an existing industry. Home Depot did this in offering the prices and ranges of a lumber yard, along with do-it-yourself classes for customers. And on the last slide for Chapter 6, we're going to look at the BCG matrix. This was developed by the Boston Consulting Group, and it's a means of evaluating strategic businesses on the basis of two things. The first one is their business growth rate, and the second is their share of the market. Business growth rate is concerned with how fast the entire industry is increasing. Market share is concerned with the business unit's share of the market in relation to the competitors. Market growth is divided into two categories, low and high, and market share is also divided into low and high. Thus, in this matrix, stars are businesses that have highly desirable, high growth and high market share compared to the dogs, which are not so favorable. They have low growth and low market share. Please let me know if you have any questions on Chapter 6.